bail out if they get into trouble. And the private sector has a role, make profit, and then turn to the public if you get into trouble.
Would you extend that to healthcare?
Well, healthcare is a dramatic case. I mean, for decades, the healthcare issue has been right at the top of domestic concerns for very good reasons. The U.S. has the most dysfunctional healthcare system in the industrial world. Has about twice the per capita costs and some of the worst outcomes. It's also the only privatized system. And if you look closely, those two things are related. I mean, the privatized system is highly inefficient. A huge amount of administration, bureaucracy, supervision, all kinds of things. It's been studied pretty carefully. Now, the public has had an opinion about this for decades. A considerable majority want a national health care system, like other industrial countries have. They usually say a Canadian-style system, not because Canada's the best, but at least you know that Canada exists. Nobody says an Australian-style system, which is much better, because who knows anything about that. But something like what's sometimes called Medicare Plus, like extend Medicare to the population. Well, it's interesting, up until the year 2004, that idea was described, for example, by the New York Times as politically impossible and lacking political support. So maybe the public wants it, but that's not what counts as political support. The financial institutions are opposed, the pharmaceutical institutions are opposed, so it's no public support. Well, in 2008, for the first time, the Democratic candidates, first Edwards, then the others, began to move in the direction of what the public has wanted. Not there, but in that direction. So what happened between 2004 and 2008? Well, public opinion didn't change. It's been this way for decades. What changed is that manufacturing industry, a big sector of the economy, has recognized that it's being severely harmed by the highly inefficient privatized health system. So General Motors said that it costs them over $1,000 more to produce a car in Detroit than across the border in Windsor, Canada. And when manufacturing industry becomes concerned, then things become politically possible, and they begin to have political support. So yes, in 2008, there's some discussion of it. Now, this is a very revealing insight into how American democracy functions and what is meant by the term political support and politically possible. Again, this should be headlines. Well, will a proposal come that approaches what the public wants? Well, we're already getting the backlash, strong backlash. What private healthcare systems are claiming is that this is unfair. The government is so much more efficient that they'll be driven. There's no level playing field if the government gets into it, which is true.
If you had a public and a private plan,
yeah,
sort of like Medicare. Most people go for Medicare, but if you wanted to go for a private plan, you could.
Yeah, if you could, but they're not. They say, well, we can't compete for good reasons. I mean, in every country, except industrial country, except the United States, the government uses its massive purchasing power to negotiate drug prices. That's one of the reasons prices are so much higher in the United States than in other countries. Well, the Pentagon can use purchasing power to negotiate prices for, paper clips or something. But by law, the government is not permitted to do that in the case of health care. Well, if you had Medicare Plus, they would, and that would drive down drug prices. And the private industries can't compete.
Fairness and Accuracy Reporting did a study of the week leading up to the White House Healthcare Summit of the networks and how they were covering single payer, the issue of like Medicare Plus, and I think they found that there was almost no representation in the media of a single payer advocate, and almost the only mention was someone blasting single payer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's because it has no political support, only the majority of the public. It's the same as the media commentary in 2004. In fact, if you take a look back at the end of the last electoral campaign, Kerry Bush campaign, in October 2004, right before the election, there was a debate on domestic issues. I think it was maybe October 28th or so. Just take a look, read the New York Times report of it the next day. It was very dramatic. It said, Kerry never brought up the idea of any government involvement in health care, not Medicare Plus, but any government involvement, because it is not politically possible and lacks political support, just the population. Well,
What studies show you the population wants this?
I mean, there's been poll after poll.
So what do you think is going to break through?
It's a problem of the general dysfunction of formal democracy. I mean, there's a very substantial gap between public opinion and public policy on a host of major issues. And on many of these issues, both parties are well to the right of the public, international and domestic. Incidentally, that's one reason why elections are run the way they are. Elections are run as marketing extravaganzas, and that's not kept secret. So the advertising industry gives an award every year for Best Marketing Campaign of the Year. For 2008, they gave it to Obama. He beat out, I think, Apple computers. And if you look at the comments of advertising executives, PR executives, they were euphoric. In fact, they said, you can read it in the Financial Times, business press, they said, we've been marketing candidates like commodities ever since Reagan, but this is the best we've ever done. It's going to change the atmosphere in corporate boardrooms. We have a new style of selling things, the Obama style, soaring rhetoric, hope and change, and so on. Yeah, that's true. And if you look at the campaigns themselves, they're designed essentially by the advertising industry to sell the commodity. It happens to be a candidate. And they're pretty carefully designed so that you marginalize issues and you focus on what are called qualities. In Obama's case, soaring rhetoric and so on. In Bush's case, nice guy, you'd like to have a beer with him and so on. That's the kind of thing you focus on. Where do they stand on issues? Well, the public is mostly uninformed. I haven't seen current polls on 2008, but the 2004 election, where there were polls shortly after, showed the public had almost no idea what Bush's stand was. In fact, a majority of Bush voters thought that he supported the Kyoto Protocol because they support it, and he's a nice guy, so he must support it. And elections designed that way, and it makes good sense. I mean, the people who run the elections, they read the polls, and very carefully, in fact. In fact, they mostly design them for their own interest. And they know that the parties are to the right of the public, so you better, on a large number of issues, including crucial ones like Iran and others, so you better keep issues off the table, which is what's done. So the healthcare is a dramatic case of it, but it's only one instance.
Linguist Noam Chomsky speaking to me in Boston last week. We will return to the last part of our conversation after this break. You can get a copy of the full 2 parts by going to democracynow.org. Stay with us.